Well, hello. How we doing, guys? It's me, it's Jean, and I'm here. And it's Thanksgiving, and I'm doing what I had mentioned that I wanted to do, except for my turkey's in the oven, and I kind of needed all a shower and stuff. So right now I'm cutting on the potatoes. But yes, welcome in, guys. I don't know how long this video is going to be. My mom might pop in, my brother might pop in. I don't know. It's kind of, it's fair game at this point. So yes, I hope everyone out there had or is having a fabulous Thanksgiving and you are with all of your family. For those that are alone, just know that you're loved, and hopefully this can make you feel not so alone. But yeah, let's get into it. So as I mentioned before, I've been talking a lot about, or not a lot, but I had been mentioning about William Brewster. And yes, I'm the 14th generation, and I'm very proud of it. Now, if you don't know who he is the elder of the Mayflower. But he had more of a role than a lot of people think in the Mayflower. There's not too much information, I would say. There's actually tons of information about him out there, but there's not information in terms of if you're not looking for it. It's not something they might teach you or teach kids, about the Mayflower Compact and everything else, and to say that most people always know who William Bradford is, and he was the governor. He also came over with Brewster and his family. Mostly William. William came over the first year, along with, I believe there's two youngest sons, I'm trying to remember. His wife came over with him. His two oldest, Jonathan and Patience, came over later, so they weren't part of that first Thanksgiving. The craziest thing is that a lot of people don't realize or know is that barely 100 people survived that first winter. Four, count them, 4 women alone survived. William was one of the 50 men that survived, and the rest were mostly children. Now, I'd have to look into to be completely on point, but I feel like one of his children came with him and his wife. But I just can't remember which one. I think it may have been wrestling. They had the strangest, coolest names. It was Jonathan, Patience, Love, Wrestling, and I feel like I'm forgetting one. One I believed died. Not that first year. It may have been the first year, but it passed away at some point, according to records. Now we've gotten that little tiny bit out of the way. I'm taking a pause because I'm trying to think of how to say this properly. With very good reasons, people out there, and if you're one of those people, just know that I very much understand where you're coming from. And these are the people that do not celebrate Thanksgiving because of how it came to be. And I'm not talking about the first winter, I'm talking about why they chose to make it a holiday. It was after the King Philip War, and they're not going to teach your kids about the King Philip War in school. And that is because if they do touch upon it, I don't remember being taught about it. I left in 2nd grade in Massachusetts, so anything before that had everything to do with my family heritage and them telling me stories of, that first Thanksgiving as much as they could to a child. Now, when I moved to Pennsylvania and in history class, they didn't teach it. I actually had no idea about that. Unfortunately, I will admit this, I didn't know about the King Philip War. I just knew that we weren't so nice to the natives. And it wasn't any fault of my parents or my mom or whatever. I was young. And then by the time I got older, not to give my whole life story away, it kind of fell along the wayside. And then I revisited it many years later when I was trying to graduate and figure out a paper to write. And that's how a lot of my information came to be, because there's a whole lifetime of these people before they even got to Plymouth. And in many ways, it ties into the other video that I was doing, even though it was Connecticut. I talked about the witch trials. Now here I'm not going to talk about any of that, except for there's a comparison with things, and it has to do with religion. It just does. That's truly why we came over here. That's all that people know, is that we started this country on religion, which is yes and which is no. Yes, we didn't start this country. There was a whole other colony before even Plymouth came. Granted, it was more merchant and money and everything else. They still came over, and they still brought their beliefs with them. Just like with Plymouth, excuse me, my nose is itchy. They brought their religion over here because that's why they came. They were being persecuted. In order to really understand this, you have to be open-minded and understand where religion even comes from the West, from England. Now, we weren't technically a country. We weren't the United States. We were still part of English rule. So with that being said, I wouldn't say William made a deal with the Queen, but in many ways he did. He was actually part of the courts. He worked with them. He worked alongside them. The home that he resided in Nottinghamshire, I call it Scooby, as in like Scooby-Doo, but it's Scrooby with a C. That was the name of the manor, and it exists even to this day. If you're part of the Mayflower Society, then you would know all about Scrooby Manor. Now, Scrooby Manor was the first country. It was on a country road, and they called it the Road to Scotland. So on that road, it was how the kings and queens throughout history were able to migrate up to Scotland, because England took over Scotland. So by that point, Mary Queen of Scots, you heard of her, right? She was actually Scottish, Scots, and she was the cousin, I believe, of Queen Elizabeth. Back to William. The Brewsters would house the kings and the queens and their courts, and they would make sure that everything was taken care of. They weren't servants, but in some ways they kind of were. They were just normal people, and that's unfortunately back then, normal people, they were servants. They would serve the court. That time, I believe it was Protestant. The country was Protestant. Don't quote me on that. It could be Protestant or Catholic. I'm trying to remember my timeline because King Henry switched it. Now, with that being said, the Brewsters, William, I don't know about his father or his mother. Actually, I don't know that much information about either of them. They, I'm not sure what religion, but they started in their own, let me pause because I gotta rinse out my sink. Okay, I'm not sure where I left off, but I know I was talking about the Scrooby Manor, and I was talking about how they would serve the kings and queens as they would come through. Now, on the side, they were not too they didn't want to practice whatever religion that England was practicing at that time. Ooh, crazy hair. They started to practice and study, I believe it's the Geneva Bible? I believe so. Hey guys, this is me unpausing. Things just got a little crazy. My mom came down, my brother came down, and all that stuff. So this is just the continuation. I needed a break. So I came up to my bedroom. To continue what I was saying, William Brewster, and a bunch of his friends, they were friends, but they eventually, I don't want to call them followers because I don't like using that word, but they accumulated, right, together, and they would practice in secret because they wanted to practice their God, their religion, and their beliefs. Well, the thing was about England, and if you know, then you know. If you don't, then, well, I'm going to tell you. If you did not practice the religion of that country, of England, no matter where you were in England, and England was pretty damn big at that time, you were killed. Your family, everything else was thrown in jail, and you had to basically stand in front of the queen, and she would determine your fate. And so at one point, William Brewster and his family, along with his oldest son Jonathan and his sister Patience, they fled. They went to Holland, and they stayed in Holland. And there they were given the right to be able to practice and to be able to write down what they believe in, because none of that was allowed in England. Unless you practiced, I believe at that time it was Protestant, unless you practiced that faith. Nope. Witchcraft, anything, herbalism, forget witchcraft, herbalism itself, you were considered a witch. So by the king or queen and the monarchy, you die. So they fled to Holland. Things got a little tricky for them. I can't exactly remember all the details of why they fled, but over time, over a period of time, they came back to England. Now, they were found out. They were caught, basically, and William was once again jailed. He was sitting in jail, awaiting his fate and trying to figure out how he's going to save his family and how he's going to save his friends. I don't like I said, I don't like call them followers, but his people. So because he had a standing, it wasn't an, I don't know if he would have been considered a noble or not, but he, like I said, he was very affiliated with the king and queen court, right? He wasn't just like a houser, like his house would be housed and they would accommodate and sleeping arrangements and food and all that stuff. He became more than that. He was a messenger. He was like a post office boy. That's how I see it. And he would carry messages around to the nobilities in the courts and whatnot. He actually played a role in Mary Queen of Scots being basically taken, and she was kept in the castle for a lot of the remainder of her life. And from what I remember, it was over a decade. And there was a letter. Queen Elizabeth actually had a hard time with this one because it's her family, and you know, she didn't want to put her cousin to death. I'll remind you, I think it was either King James or King Henry's. I think it was King James, one of them. Sorry, I'm getting all mixed up. My brain, there's a lot on my brain. It's irrelevant for this story. So when the time came, he stood in front of that queen, pleaded his case. And like I had mentioned before, and if you already know, there was already a colony in Jamestown, Virginia, okay? Columbus had already did his thing. So they knew of us. They knew of this land. He knew of this land. So he pled his case and he begged, let us go. Let us be able to practice what we want to practice, but we won't do it in your presence. Let us be able to, basically do whatever the hell we want to do, but in a very elegant and very well-spoken way. Even though William Brewster was not on paper for education, he did go to Cambridge for a little while, but there's no graduation documentation, but he was an educated person. So when he went to her, he was able to speak to her and plead his case the way he wanted to, and to get out of England. So he pled his case, and him and alongside hundreds some other people, they set sail, and they didn't even mean to hit Plymouth. That's just a fact. They ended up, where they ended up. They hit Plymouth Rock. They sailed off course for a couple months, and which also set back for supplies and food and everything else. They land, they do their thing, and then the harsh conditions of New England set in, which I can only imagine back then how that was, because it was pretty crazy. So they land, and what they accompany, or what they see, is terrifying to them, because they do see the natives, and this is a whole brand new, and you know, they unfortunately, ooh, I'm about to drop my phone. Hold on. Pause this real quick. Okay. Yeah, so they got there. They did their thing. And they realized the harsh conditions, right? They have it, and it's not like they could build a house right away. They had to live kind of on the boat. They, you know, they tried to build, I think they did build what they needed to, but when the harsh conditions kind of came in, it literally wiped them out. It literally wiped them out. It killed a lot of people. Now, here is what I remember of the stories that I've been told and why I personally, along with my mother, my brother, and I can't speak for my other family, but why a lot of us actually celebrate this day. We celebrate this day because a group of people who could not speak our language, they were familiar with white people or the white man because throughout the history of their time, they have come across us before. Now, I learned an interesting fact when I was doing Jonathan, which is William's son, about the Mohegans and also about the Pequot. God forgive me if I'm saying that wrong. I have really bad pronunciation. But apparently, the Pequot didn't want us to land, did not want to have anything to do with us because of previous experiences. There was a few, I can't remember, forgive me, there was 3 or 4 of natives who were on the opposite side. They saw our boat coming, right? They saw our boat coming. And there was like 3 or 4 of the Pequot that were actually okay. They were excited. They wanted to welcome us in. Because their tribesmen didn't agree, those small few branched off, and that's where the Mohegans come from. Northern Mohegans. There's 2 types of Mohegans. I'm talking about the Northern Mohegans. They actually go up into Canada. So, and it's the reservation in Connecticut, and way northern Connecticut. The Wampanoag, I'm not quite sure of that stories of remembering how they felt when they saw us coming. But the fact is, it's one of the 1,000 reasons why I'm a humanitarian. They saw people, lots and lots of death. Okay, the Wampanoag saw lots and lots of death through us of what was happening. If you can only imagine, I mean, well over 100 men, and only 50 survive. And there was a lot more women on that boat as well. When another human being sees another human being suffering, it's what happens next that, in my opinion, defines a soul. And it's beautiful that these people who knew, actually, no, they didn't know, because what we turned around and did was absolutely awful. And that's why a lot of people don't celebrate this, because they didn't have to save us. They didn't have to come to us and give us food. That's what they did. They ate for 3 days in a festive way. They came to them out of compassion. The natives came to the white men out of compassion and out of love and out of not wanting to watch another human being suffer. That's the Wampanoag. They were a very peaceful tribe, even to this day. They're very peaceful people. For a long time, my grandpa used to say he had native blood in him, and it's actually kind of why I got into Ancestry, because I ended up doing a DNA test to see if I had it or if any of us had native blood in us. We don't. And which I was kind of disappointed, but at the same time, that's okay. The fact that these group of people who did not speak our language, did not practice our religion, they just saw other human beings needing help. So they reached out and they stepped in and they gave us food. And not to mention, they taught them how to grow food. That first winter began a treaty between the Wampanoag in the colony of Plymouth. What happened, the destruction that came later, was over 50 years later. William Brewster was not alive. A lot of these men that they saved are not alive. The King Philip, he was the son of, is it Miles Standish? No, I'm so sorry. I can't remember the name of this chief, but he was the original chief that helped during that first winter. I believe it was his son or the next generation. I'll say that. The next generation when the King Philip War happened. And at some point I will talk about that, because since a lot of people don't know, and all they do know is that something bad happened. But just to point out, the reason I was not taught this in school and my parents didn't tell me at a young age what happened is because to this day, it is the #1 bloodiest massacre that has happened on our soil. Now we call it the United States soil. Next to the Civil War. And the only reason there's a difference is because the per capita of how many people, but they really did slaughter peaceful people at a place, or during, it's a town, they used to call them, there was like 12 or 13 of them back then, they were called prayer towns. Yes, they were called prayer towns. They were conversion towns for natives, basically to to convert them to Christianity and to whitewash them. And I say that with quotes, and I didn't mean it with quotes. They really were trying to whitewash them. But dialing it back, going back to the important stuff of William Brewster, this man was peaceful. These people were peaceful. The natives were peaceful, and along with these English people, they were not. I was reading somewhere, I think online, and I try to stay away from that stuff because the level of misinformation or adding your emotions to it. It's okay to add emotion, but it's not okay to let your emotions overdrive those facts, because facts are facts. So yeah, not quite maybe an hour. I wasn't quite sure how long this video was going to be, but I wanted to just come on here and tell y'all that Thanksgiving is more than what people think it is, I guess. Today in 2025, all people care about is, their pumpkin pies or, their big old birds, and a lot of stuff has been lost. And I think more now than ever, we really need to open our doors and welcome people in. I don't care what religion you are. I don't care who you pray to. I don't care where you come from in this world. Open your door to starving people. If there's any lesson from Thanksgiving, it's that. Everything has a dark side to it. Every aspect of history has a bad side. Does not justify it, does not make it okay at all. But just know, I had said it earlier when I was doing stuff in the kitchen, that if you do not practice this holiday, that's okay. That's respectable. It's respectable. But please, for people who honor this day, it's not about this or left or right or whatever. I don't care who you are. It's about compassion. It's about love. It's about humanity. It's about humanity. Yes, we bring our families together and we see each other, or we call each other when we haven't talked to each other in a long time, but we're forgetting the starving. We're forgetting people who can't afford a meal. So yeah, just think of those, say more than a prayer. My first year in South Carolina, real quick, and then I'm going to wrap this up. My first year in first Thanksgiving in South Carolina, I was in Pawleys Island, and I was working in a gas station. And since I had just started working there, right, I didn't feel like I could get the day off. And besides, my family was all up north, and I really didn't have that kind of family to really sit and have Thanksgiving dinner. So I was at work. The most beautiful thing happened, and it's actually one of the main things that made me fall in love with this state and the people, and especially the Gullah community, because sure enough, I'm standing there behind a counter at the hotspot in Pawleys Island, and two people walk in of the Gullah community and ask me, "Did you have a hot meal today? Did you have, a Thanksgiving meal?" I said, "No, ma'am, I did not. I'm here, blah, blah, blah." And she said, "Hold on a second." One walked out to their car, reached in, I'm assuming it was a hot thing or a hot thing container or cooler or whatever, and she came back in and she gave myself and a coworker of mine a hot Thanksgiving meal because we didn't have it. They didn't know me. I didn't know them. I'd only been living there for like 3 months. But I can guarantee it wasn't just that day. It was also Christmas Eve, and I didn't work Christmas Day. And I want to say New Year's. So, and that was in 2009. So it's kindness is here. Kindness is everywhere. You just have to know how to look for it and maybe decide to play a role and do that yourself. I personally haven't been able to. However, everybody that knows me knows that my door is open, or I'm just a call away. If you need a hot meal, I might not be able to house you, but I can help housing. I can point you in the direction of where to go. That's kindness, guys. And that to me is what Thanksgiving is about. So yeah, I hope all of you are loved and full and cozy and spending time with your loved ones. If you're not, just know that there is someone out there, her name is Jean, that will send good thoughts, prayers, all the good stuff for you. Okay? Again, I wish all of you love and happy Thanksgiving. Till next time, cheers.